All right, Ecclesiastes 12. You realize what that means? We're down to the very last chapter of this book, Ecclesiastes 12. And following on the end of chapter 11, which started focusing on the youth and their attitude toward life. And it's going to pick up here in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse number 1. This is still targeted at youth. It says in verse 1, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them." So start out with reminding youth to remember their Creator. Now, this is what follows on chapter 11, which basically he uses a little bit of sarcasm there when he says, go, eat, drink, be merry, live it up. Then he says, but everything you do, I'll bring you in judgment for. So he's not really giving the youth a license to do whatever they want. He's sort of telling them, you go right on ahead and you do what you want, but I'll hold you accountable for it. In other words, you're not going to be able to use your youth as an excuse. Well, that was just my youthful days. I'm sowing my wild oats. And God says, go ahead, sow them, but you're going to pay for it. And so God has this really kind of, y'all go do what you want to do, but I'm still going to be me, and I'm still going to hold you to my standards, not yours. So chapter 12 starts out with an admonition to remember him. And what that means is not just to mentally acknowledge the fact that he exists, but to respect the fact that he exists and respects the fact that he's your creator and respect the fact that he has his own will and own way he wants people to live. And he's talking to the youth. Okay? He's not talking to the old folks here. He's talking to the youth. And he's telling the youth, you remember your creator in the days of thy youth. You remember him while the evil days come not. Now, evil in Scripture, we use evil as devil, but evil in Scripture just simply means something harmful. Okay? Because there was time God repented of the evil he was going to do to someone. That didn't mean God was devilish. I mean, God planned on hurting them. And then he said, okay, I'm not going to hurt him now. Okay, so he repents of the evil that he planned to do to them. So when you get to Scripture, you see wickedness, sin, those are all bad things. Evil just simply means harm. So there are harmful days coming, young person. Basically what he's saying. But if you stop now, before the harmful days come, and you focus your life on the Lord now, and you focus your life around the Lord while you're young, okay, before those harmful days come, before the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, basically saying the years, I get no pleasure out of the years anymore because you've grown old. In fact, when we jump into verse 2, it's going to be an entire metaphorical passage on being old, describing old age. And it's all directed at the youth. Because he follows up with, and you say, I have no pleasure in them. And then verse 2 says, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened or the clouds return after the rain. I.e., your eyesight ain't no good anymore. Matter of fact, there's going to be several references to the eyesight going here. Okay? Verse 3, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. Now that's referring to the arms. Okay? The keepers of the house shall tremble. The strong men or the legs shall bow themselves. So he's describing. So suddenly the sun's just doesn't have the impact that it had. Moons, the stars, you just don't appreciate them anymore. And all of a sudden the keepers of the house, basically the arms, are trembling. They're unsure. The legs, those strong men, right? They're bowing. They're not so sure of themselves anymore. And the grinders cease. This is my favorite one. And the grinders cease because they are few. That's not talking about people making bread. It's talking about your teeth. Your grinders cease because they're few. You don't have many teeth in your head. We giggle, but that's what he's describing old age. And he's describing it to youth. You remember your Creator in the days of your youth, okay? Before these evil days come. Before there comes a time when your strong, muscly arms are no longer strong and muscly, okay? That they're They're weak and they shake. And those strong legs you used to run with and jump with and hi-ya kick with and all those things, suddenly they're bowing. They're not that strong anymore. Okay? I do realize that there are exercises and things you can do to aid in the not aid in the dinner, but aid in the prevention of the overall the degeneration of your physical body, but it's still physically decaying. You may be able to take a little bit of a bite out of it, but you're not going to stop yourself from growing old. Okay? Some of the streaming channels we watch still do advertisements, and they're always seems like they must be expecting all these people to be old, or they're tailoring the commercials to us because they know we're in our 50s. I think that's probably more likely, but it's always these supplements for your knees and right? Am I laughing? I mean, knees, all these supplements to help you deal with old age. I can only assume that it must be that they know us. They know it's us, and they know what age we are, so they're tailoring the commercials to people of our age. So I'm constantly getting these things for this supplement and that supplement and this supplement and that supplement, because of old age. Because face it, the keepers of the house will tremble. The strong men will bow themselves. The grinders will cease because they are few. Those that look out the windows be darkened. There's your eyesight again. Okay, you have a harder time seeing things. And so this is all taking place. Verse 4, and the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low. This is talking about hearing now. And he shall rise up at the voice of a bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. So it's talking about the hearing here. Okay, that it's dull, but yet I like this thing about the voice of the bird. He rises up. In other words, he doesn't sleep real deep anymore. Anything can wake him up. Okay, even the chirping of a bird can just wake him up. But yet it doesn't hear very well. So it's about your hearing going out, which means you can hear certain pitches, but you can't hear other pitches. So when you get down to the daughters of the music being brought low, that you have to walk over and turn and crank it all the way up to be able to hear it, right? But when you're trying to sleep, the slightest bit of noise can keep you awake. That's old age. That's old age. Then he goes on into verse 5. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high. Old folks, like myself, don't like climbing up in high places. Truthfully, when I was young, I didn't like climbing up on high places. So nothing's really changed there. And I don't know that I'm necessarily quote unquote afraid of heights, like people describing afraid of heights. But I just don't like climbing up on ladders. I don't like looking over the edge of things that are high. I suddenly start getting things start swooning. Woo, you know what I'm saying? And it just rather not. Thank you very much. But older people, as you get older, because the keepers of the gate, the arms are shaky, the legs are shaky, you can't hear very well, you can't see very well. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in a position where if you fell, you would get seriously hurt. So you don't like going high. This is what it's talking about, old age. You're afraid of heights. Fear shall be in the way. Okay? And the almond tree shall flourish. That's funny because I looked that up, and that's a reference to the color of your hair. You go gray or white. Almond trees go gray or white when they're in. So this is what's talking about. Your almond tree is going to flourish. Not mine. I imagine mine will be gone long before I turn into a full gray or white-headed person. So I've always said, though, that I'd trade a full head of white hair or gray hair any day for, you can have my baldness and I'll take your gray hair. People always complain about, I've got gray hair. I'll take it. You can have my baldness. But, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail. And again, you think of a grasshopper being a burden. A grasshopper? I used to play with them little buggers, grasshoppers or locusts. I used to play with them when I was a kid in Oklahoma. Catch them, do all kinds of fun things with them. But and ultimately, we were cruel to caterpillars. I have to tell you this, but oh yes, just put that out there. But no one would think of the grasshopper as being, okay, in swarm, sure, but not a single grasshopper being a burden. But it could be. If you're old, frail, feeble, it'd be very difficult. Even a grasshopper could be painful, could be uncomfortable to deal with. The desire shall fail, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Again, this is all written to youth. Your long home, the direction you're going, because I know when you're young, you don't think about death. When you're young, you don't think about growing old. You're young. You're just getting started. You're just getting a chance to do things that you couldn't do when you were a child, let's just say, because we'll deal with youth. And so you're getting your independence slowly, doing things for yourself, figuring things out for yourself, becoming less and less dependent on your parents or the adults in your world. That's all part of the growing up. But the sober reality of the book of Ecclesiastes is focusing on youth and helping them understand youth is a small fraction of your life. A tiny little strip in the great long timeline of your life. Okay? And to live your life as if it's your entire life, and that old age will never be a problem for you. I've told the story before because it's just an amazing story. I never really thought I'd ever run into anybody who had the idea that science was somehow going to keep him from growing old and dying. I don't imagine science did that for him. I imagine since it's been 20, 25 years that he's aged 20 to 25 years, regardless of his dependence upon science. Because what you don't understand about death and growing old, okay, it's part of the curse that we brought into creation. When our race disobeyed God in the garden, we brought death into the world because of our sin. So not only is our race affected by death, but all of creation is affected by death. And it may sound silly, but, having to deal with my dog the other day, not the other day, a year ago, 2 years, something like that. There came a point when I was, in the end, where I was overwhelmed with the reality. I know he's just my dog, but that my race caused this suffering. My race committed the sin that brought death into the world. My hope was he'd always just crawl in his little basket, close his eyes, and just not wake up. But he didn't. He drug it out for a long time. Decayed over a long period of time. Became more pitiful over a long period of time. But it taught me a great lesson. This is the reality that our race brought into this world because of this sin. Because death came into the world by who? Adam. And death passed upon all men, for all have sinned. Death is the reality. And the preacher here in this Ecclesiastes is trying to look at the youth and go, you need to frame your worldview with the reality that in spite of how energetic and impervious you feel right now, okay, death is knocking at your door just as much as it's knocking at an 80-year-old's door. How many, here's what I always say to myself all the time, because I watch the obituaries and the news and stuff a lot, just to keep track of what's going on. But Mary's in her 80s, right? She's a good old octogenarian there. Right? You know how many teenagers have died and she's still kicking? A lot of young people my age have died. Mary's still kicking. Because the reality of death is, you don't die because you're 80. You die because God says it's your time to die. He may let you live into your 80s or 90s. My dad's in his 80s. I'm shocked. But he's in his 80s because none of my other folks have ever lived that long. Usually hit 70 and they're dead. Something takes them out. My dad's kicking it in his 80s. Okay? There's been a lot of young people die. Well, my brother-in-law died. My brother-in-law died shortly after my mama died. My dad's still kicking it. Matter of fact, he's doing better today than he's been doing in years. He's going to die, because everybody is. There's nothing morbid about a young person having that reality in frame, because you know what it'll do? Here's what it does. It helps you remember your Creator. It helps you remember the fact that in spite of how invulnerable you feel, you're still going to face that same Creator. And if you think, well, I'll get pious, I'll get religious later in life, you don't know that you have that long. You don't know you're going to be an oxygenarian. Okay? You don't know you're ever going to, I just like that word. And you just don't know. You may never reach that. And so you have to focus today. I'm young. I got energy. I feel impervious. Yes, but always remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Verse 6. Or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. This is, again, just a picture of death. The silver cord's broken off of the golden bowl and it crashes. That's it. Life's done. The broken pitcher at the fountain. Again, here's the pitcher. Here's the fountain. But guess what? Pitcher's broken. It's no longer functional, although life is still going on. The wheel, there it is. But it's also broken. This is terrible. It's all coming to an end. But God said, this is the way, this is the reality. Then shall the dust return, verse 7. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Verse 8, vanity of vanity, saith the preacher. All is vanity. Ultimately, he says what's going to happen. It's going to come down where the body's going to return to dust, and the spirit's going to return unto God. Okay, which kind of defeats the whole concept of soul sleep or soul annihilation. But nevertheless, here in the Old Testament, here they are very clearly saying what happens at death. Your body returns to the dust, but what? Your soul goes back up to God who gave it. To stand judgment. That's why the New Testament says it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that, what? The judgment. Now, this doesn't have to be a morbid concept. This could actually be a very uplifting concept. Because I know I've got however many days God has given me. To be honest with you, when I was in my 20s, I never thought I'd live to my 50s. I thought Jesus would come back. I never envisioned what the 50s or the 40s or even the 30s would look like. Now I'm kind of looking forward to being in my 60s. Does that sound bad? Because then you can tell everybody you're a sexagenarian. That's just a fun word to say too. So, but I am. Now I'm getting to the point where I want a white beard and a white head of hair. I want to walk around looking all old and wise and sagely. You know? Sit there in the corner and dole out cute stories and wisdom. You know, as people come by. I'm actually looking forward to one because all I have to do is sit there and talk. And but although I'm in that stage where unfortunately I should be more active than I am, you know, because I really actually do have the physical capabilities of being more active than I am, but I want to be the old wise guy sitting in the corner. But that's just reality. The reality is you have to realize, you have to focus your life on the fact that regardless of your age, okay, it's just that youth tend to be more prone to forget that they're just as capable of dying as the 80, the 90, the 100-year-old. They look at it as, oh, I'm not old. Like, okay. Do you know, according to statisticians, in 30 years' time, 2050, we'll just run it up that way. Somewhere, less than 30 years, actually, isn't it? Yeah, it's less than 30 years, about 26 years now. In 26 years' time, 60% of the population, hold on to this, will be oxygenarians. That's what they're saying. Okay, 60% of the population will be oxygenarians. And that sounds phenomenal, that 60% of the population is going to be over the age of 80. That will be you. That will be us. Well, you'll be close, right? You're not quite my age, right? So, no, that's the problem they're bringing up, because 60% of the population will be not just in their 50s or 60s, they'll be in their 80s. Everyone else will fit into 40% of the population. Okay. Well, I don't know if you haven't noticed, oxygenarians aren't that independent and mobile because the grinders cease and the gatekeepers are weak and the strong men are bowing and the eyes are dim and the ears are deaf. And you know what I'm saying? There's just a lot of things. And what these statisticians were saying is we're making a mistake investing in infrastructure that is focused on the youth. Because right now, at the time they did their lecture, it's 30 years, but in 26 years now, 60% of the population will be in their 80s. That will be me. I will be in my 80s. I'll be an oxygenarian in 2050. Okay, around that time. I'll be hitting there. So I'll be one of those. Okay. And so their point is that, everything's focused on the youth, but in 30 years, the youth will be the minority of the population. Most people will be oxygenarians, and then you give it another 30 years past that, and the population will decrease significantly. And then by the time we get to, we're in 2050 now, 2100, it's possible, according to their stats, it's not possible. I can refute most of their stats, but that the human race will end. This is untrue because, again, you can't. It's like the illustration I give about you have brown goats and you have white goats. And if one set of goats stops producing, which generally takes the whole entire goat population overall statistic down, the brown goats are still producing. The white goats may not be, but that doesn't mean all goats are going to cease to exist. It means white goats are going to cease to exist. The browns are going to be fine. So if you have a subgroup out there who is replacing themselves and adding more because every woman's having 3 kids, not just 2 or 1, you know what I'm saying? Then when everybody else goes down, they're still going to be fine. What you really ended up, they say it's not going to be the whole human race. It's just going to be the people who aren't bothering to increase their population. The ones that are increasing their population will simply be the last ones here. They will be the human race. So there's a little, but I don't doubt that on the whole, in 30 years, 60% of the population probably will be oxygenarians. And the problem they have down with that is that nobody's preparing for that reality. There's going to be less young people to take care of the oxygenarians. There's going to be, to be nurses, to be doctors, to be healthcare providers, to sack your groceries, to deliver your groceries. This is why you think they're working on all these robots and AI robots and things. It's all because they realize they're coming to a point where there won't be enough young people to do anything. The young people will disappear. Well, then why try to focus an entire world on young people? Because the reality is young people are always going to disappear because they're always going to grow old. Ultimately, this is the lesson that the preacher's trying to say here. I know when we were young, we partied. We lived like we were young. He said, but the reality is we were all growing old. And then all of a sudden we're going to arrive at our elder years. This is what really gets me to. Is when these elderly people try to act like they're teenagers. To me, this looks so silly to me. They're trying to dress like teenagers, entertain themselves like teenagers, and somehow, that's a good thing. And then some of them say, but then they have to take so many supplements because they're in so much pain for trying to do what the young people can do and recover. That it really doesn't work. But we don't need to be taking our older generation and trying to make them act like our younger generation. We need to take our younger generation and get them to mature up. I don't think young people should set our clothing standards, our entertainment standards, our eating standards, or anything like that. That's just my personal opinion. I'd rather go to someone like Mary, and well, I know we're getting to a point where that age group is not has made a wrong turn somewhere. But at the same time, that's where we should go to. The young should imitate the old, not the old imitate the young. It's like one old man said, I can do anything a young person can do. It takes me longer to do it and far longer to recover after I've done it, but I can do it. Well, that may be true. But I think what we need to realize here, and what's kind of this common sense thing that Solomon is trying to present to the young people, is simply this. Okay? This is part of your existence. You're growing old. You're growing up. Okay? You will be an adult longer than you'll ever have been a youth. And the point of childhood and youth is to learn how to be an adult. Youth is wonderful because it's resilient. It can make a mistake and bounce back real quick. It's harder to bounce back when you're an adult, especially the older you get. So that's why it's a great time to learn to make mistakes. But why is it that suddenly now old people become a burden? And people look at old people, like I was talking to a friend the other day, and they were saying that, I was talking to a friend, but there was also a podcast I listened to. And the podcast I listened to were dealing with euthanasia in Canada. And Canada, in the last 10 years, has euthanized 100,000 of its population. Okay? Because they're old. This is a statistical fact. They've done it. Okay? They've euthanized them because they've passed they're called the MAID Act, is what it's called. It comes in 2 tracks. Track 1 is supposed to just be those who are terminally ill. Track 2 is anybody who just doesn't want to live anymore. And so they promised track 1 when they introduced it, they'd never go to track 2. Well, it's full blue. Now they're going to track 3. Track 3 is if you anticipate a child may grow up and have some kind of disease that will be a burden on society. I'm not talking about in the womb. I'm talking about it's out kicking and breathing air. That you can terminate it because it will be a burden on society. Here's the odd stat. You ready for this? And this is where I'm going with all this. That 96% of that 100,000 are white. 96, that means 96,000 white Canadians have been euthanized in the last 10 years. 96,000. And the question come up, why the disproportion? Why is it so many white people getting euthanized versus people of other ethnicities? And there was a response that came that I thought was perfect. And this one lady who is white asked this man who is black, these are Canadians, why he thought there was such a huge disparaging difference in the stats. And here's what he says. He goes, oh, that's simple. And he goes, she says, what? How's that simple? He goes, oh, it's real easy. Why? He goes, we don't even put our old people in nursing homes. Y'all not drop them off in nursing homes and just forget about them. We keep our old people in our homes and we take care of them. Grandma sits in the corner entertaining the grandkids till the day she dies. So we ain't taking our old folks and throwing them in nursing homes. We're taking care of them ourselves. So consequently, we ain't marching them down to these MAID clinics and having them euthanized or encouraging them to be euthanized because we're taking care of our old people. Because they're raised up in a culture where the youth look at the elderly and think there's something valuable and they're needed in their lives. And so they take care of them up until the day they die, and that cycle continues. You don't just remove the elderly from out of your life and put them someplace else and then go about your youthful life. No, you keep age always in your home. You see age always in your home. You get that one day you're going to go down that route yourself, and you're going to want your family to be there to watch over you and take care of you. It doesn't always work. I get it. But he was trying to point out, this particular man, why there were so few minorities in Canada that were being euthanized as opposed to the number of white Canadians that were being euthanized. And his observation came from the culture itself. Because youth is prioritized, old is considered a burden on society. Therefore, they're pushed out. You don't fit into my youthful lifestyle, so I don't want you around here, grandma, great-grandma, great-great-grandma, grandpa, whatever, shove you over into someplace else, let somebody else take care of you. The problem that's going to happen is, as I said, in 26 years, there ain't going to be enough people to hand them to. Nobody. And a lot of that comes from simply the fact that youth just want to be young, and they don't realize you're headed there. You need to see your elders. You need to be around your elders. You need to experience. I remember my grandma. The only grandparent I remember is my grandma Lovelady. Okay, she was in her 70s when I was like 9 or 10 years old. Okay, she died in her early 70s from cancer. But I remember, there was something different when you had, and she lived at home. Okay, she lived at home, and there was just something different when you walked into grandma's presence. What is it because she's old? You're 8 or 9 years old. You know what I'm saying? All the world is Captain Kangaroo and Sesame Street. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden you walk into this room with this elderly lady who, by the way, was even that age was quite spry. And let me tell you something. That woman could get a hickory switch faster than you could. I mean, she delighted in it. And it wasn't hickory, though. It was an apricot tree. She just called it a hickory switch. And she didn't have any hickory trees around her house. She had an apricot tree, which I love. That's why I love apricots, because they remind me of grandma. And we'd go pick them fresh off the tree and eat them. I mean, it was just so fun being at grandma's. And I say grandma's, but she lived with everybody. She didn't have her own place. She was with us. And so, man, I'll tell you what, Mom and Dad may have failed, but Granny never failed to get that hickory switch and go after you. But can I tell you something else that was neat about having grandma around? Was when I had time alone with her. It was just me. And I remember, I have vivid memories of lying next to her on her bed. And she would sit there and she would say, Junior. That's what my family calls me. Junior, one of these days, Jesus is going to come back. He's going to split them clouds. He's going to come back to this old world. And he's going to judge. But those memories stuck with me. She would play these records of these gospel singers. I almost want to say one of them was Lester Roloff. I almost want to say, you know who that is. I don't know if the rest of you know who that is, but he's an old-time Texas preacher. But I remember the image on the album cover, and now after seeing so many pictures of Lester Roloff, I'm almost saying it's Lester Roloff. Might not have been, but I was almost saying it's Lester Roloff. But she'd play those things. Some of my younger cousins and stuff who were teenagers would mock her for playing the gospel music. They'd mock her for playing the gospel music. But she'd play it anyway, bless her. Okay? Let me tell you something. I was one headstrong woman, I want you to know. Okay? When she got it in her head, this is the way things ought to be. Let me tell you something. It was going to be that way. Okay? And she was amazing in so many ways. She wasn't the last actually to die. My grandma Marker on my mom's side died, but she died in prison. So I never got to know her. But he raises his eyebrows. She did. She died in prison. And she beat some guy to death, so they put her in prison. And my mom never mentioned her, so I assumed she had died a long time ago. And then all of a sudden she dies in prison. And my mom tells me your grandma Marker died in prison. And I'm like, what? I thought she'd been dead for decades by that time. Nope, she'd been in prison, and Mom just kept her mouth shut about it and didn't say anything. But there was just something about having that living history book and spending time with that living history. I'm going to tell you something. When Grandma died, and we had no more grandparents in our lives, there was something was lost. The family lost something. You know? It lost an anchor in its traditions, an anchor in its history, an anchor in where you come from to help direct you where you're going. We lost that. Okay? We did. We lost it. Well, I say we lost it. But I kind of want to sit up and say one thing. I think my grandmama set me on the path that I ended up walking. I think watching her stand for her faith amongst the family that mocked her for her faith gave me the strength I needed when it happened to me. That in spite of the world you live in, you do what you know is right. And I think that really kind of gave me some of my tenacity to just go, no, I'm going to do what I believe is right. I think it really came from my grandma, who I watched graciously take the mocking, graciously, take, and yet she stood her ground. She stood her head up high. She was who she was, and she was unashamed of it. And I think that was a powerful example to me, to see my grandma live like that and be like that. And then all those times we would sit, she'd talk about Jesus and talk about, mostly about the second coming. I don't know what to tell. Maybe that's what gave me my taste for eschatology. And I think really a lot of who I am was more of those times when I was with my grandma than probably any other family member. I talk about my dad a lot and the lessons I learned from him. But I think my spirituality really comes from Jesus, but the desire really comes from the time I spent with my grandma. Leela Lovelady. Maiden name Hargis. But we need the old in our life. And the youth need to realize how important having the old elderly in our life are. And the youth need to realize you're going to be elderly one day. Yeah, I know this is targeted. We got one member of this whole entire thing that this is targeted after. There's the youth right there. So all the rest of us are already in our midlife crisis. And anyway. All right, well, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll be dismissed. We'll pick up the latter part of the chapter next week. Father, thank you so much for this morning. Bless now, please, and help us to point youth in the right direction. Help us to encourage youth to go, but help us even in our middle age to always respect those who are older than us and have a history, know things that we don't know, value the elderly, because we're all going to be there one day. We're all going to be the elderly. We're all going to be those white-haired or no-haired people sitting in the corner. And Father, I pray that you just help us to respect our elders, understand that's ultimately our long home where we're going, and help us to honor you through that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's